Good afternoon, everyone. So today I am here with Sal Gangemi. He's a labor and employment litigator and advisor at the law firm Murtha Kulina, and he is an expert in OSHA. So, for most of us, we know we're dealing every day with the OSHA Emergency Temporary Standard. Last Friday, the Supreme Court heard arguments on this case, so we expect the ruling in the next couple of days. OSHA's going forward with their mandate, and it's really going to start taking effect in the next couple of months, meaning there's no change. So Sal and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, and he's been knee deep in OSHA for a long time in his career, and specifically focused on healthcare facilities and how OSHA affects them. So he's truly versed. I think a great resource. So Sal, just take it from here. What are you seeing out there? What's going on? And tell us what your take is on the OSHA and the Emergency Temporary Standard.
Sure. So when we think of OSHA, or when we used to think of OSHA, we used to think of construction accidents. So we used to think about unsafe conditions. We really didn't think too much about it in terms of infectious diseases or pandemics, which we don't get very often, right? So I've seen a lot of enforcement activity since even before the emergency temporary standard, the healthcare emergency temporary standard was issued in June, because there were a few emergency temporary standards to address these things. So even before that, I mean, based on whether it be employee complaints, OSHA was getting called in to investigate, particularly if there was a COVID-related death of an employee in long-term care facilities and in hospitals. And you were seeing that. I mean, you were seeing that in New York and Connecticut and Massachusetts. And they would basically come in and conduct an audit and ultimately cite the employer for maybe not complying with what we call the respiratory protection standard, which very few people, very few companies were familiar with, at least in the context of something like this, right? So companies or healthcare facilities that didn't have to comply with this respiratory protection standard are because they didn't perform the kinds of activities that would implicate it. We're now in a position where they found they had to comply, and a lot of them were having problems. So we've been fighting with OSHA, and I hope nobody from OSHA sees this, but we've been going back and forth with them on very similar issues, and a lot of it relates to the respirator protection standard, which requires, among other things, that you have a respiratory protection program governing the use of respirators. It's not enough to just give everyone an N95. They have to be medically evaluated and fit tested. And during the pandemic, it wasn't so easy, first of all, to get a supply of these things, and secondly, to get someone to come in and conduct a proper fit test. So we've been dealing with that. We're kind of, I hope we're at the tail end of it. Because I do think that OSHA is overwhelmed right now. And they're going to be even more overwhelmed if this ETS, the one that you were referring to when we first started, is permitted to go forward. I don't think it will. I think it's going to get stricken. But the challenge for my clients right now is they can't assume that it's going to be stricken, right? So for example, by January 10th, they already had to collect vaccination status. Now, then they have to start testing. And OSHA's already stated that as far as testing goes, for those employees who aren't vaccinated, they're not going to start enforcing that mandate until after February 10th. So there's not a lot of time to act. And it's not an easy proposition for employers right now. It's really not.
So for an employer perspective, and I think, one of the things that I've heard from some of the people that we represent is They say OSHA is usually, they're being simplistic about giving you a mask or telling you to wear gloves or those sorts of things. There's bloodborne pathogen, whatever it might be, right? The
Right.
OSHA, the construction accident kind of stuff.
Right.
But if they want me to put a shot in my arm, that goes home with me,
Well,
right?
that's the point, right? That's the point, and that's where it's overbroad. And that was an argument that was made. Listen, OSHA should be concerned about workplace safety, but an argument can be made that that OSHA is being used to vaccinate the public at large. And regardless of what you think about vaccinations, right? It probably goes beyond what they're really authorized to do by law. If we want to do that, fine, but let's get a law in place. And that's really what the argument is. Now, there's other mandates that I think are probably going to be, at least in some form, upheld, like the Medicaid, the requirement that any healthcare provider that's accepting Medicaid, for example, or Medicare, has to ensure that their employees are vaccinated. That probably would be something that's upheld because that's there to protect the public health, the health and safety of the public. The people coming in, the patients.
So that's interesting. So I'm going to ask you to speculate on this next question.
Wrong when I speculate.
That's all right. It's like predicting the weather. It's fine. Don't worry. No one's going to hold you accountable.
Right.
So one of the things that I've been having some discussions with people about is they say whether it's stricken, the mandate, or it's not stricken, right? Let's just call it, for argument's sake, we're at about 35% in the country vaccinated versus unvaccinated, right?
Right.
So whichever way this goes, there's going to be a very large population that is angry, right?
That's right.
And angry at the other side of the population.
That's right.
Right. So from an employer's perspective, who now is going to be on the front lines, they're probably going to have, it used to be the accounting department hated the sales team, right? Right. Now you can see the organization's breaking apart along vaccinated, unvaccinated lines.
Right.
What is there, or what do you anticipate? The biggest problem that's going to come out of whatever side of the ruling, if you use my numbers and the Hatfields and McCoys are going to go at it, right?
Right.
So what is the biggest thing employers should be preparing for? And two, what do you anticipate potential problems that could come out? I'm talking, someone feels discriminated against because they're not vaccinated, or they're vaccinated, or they're shamed, or what are some of the things that you're seeing? So A, what should they do to deal with this? B,
right.
What do you anticipate the issues coming out of it being?
Well, it's interesting you raise that, because earlier today I actually read a survey of large companies, and the survey question was, if the mandate is stricken down, will you continue to implement these mandatory vaccines policies, or mandatory vaccine or testing policies? And a very high number, a majority, like 70% of the companies that were surveyed said, no, we're not going to go forward with it because it's too much trouble to implement it. So, what do I think? What should companies do? I mean, I think they need to keep the lines of communication open. And I think they're probably going to have to start drafting policies that address this type of conduct. Technically, it's not illegal to, quote unquote, harass a vaccinated or an unvaccinated person, right? But I think they're going to have to come up with these policies, because it's going to create a huge morale problem, and it could potentially lead to other kinds of employment claims, like, for example, a disability discrimination claim or a religious discrimination claim. They don't know why I'm not vaccinated. Maybe if it has to do with my religion, or it has to do with my medical condition, and because they're harassing me based on my unvaccinated status, I consider that disability discrimination or religious discrimination. So it's Siri. So it's something that really needs to be considered. However, I do feel that a lot of companies may, and again, it all depends on their workforce, the type of workforce they have. Okay. What I've seen, for example, is companies with a large blue collar workforce are having a tremendous problem getting people to vaccinate, are opting for testing, okay, for the testing option for those companies that provide that option. I'll tell you right now, a lot of them do, because they can't afford to lose people. They can't afford to lose employees. They're having a difficult time figuring out, how do we get people tested when it's very difficult to get tested right now. And even if we have home tests or over-the-counter tests, yes, you can use those tests, but the testing and the results have to be proctored. How do you proctor them? Okay. And the ETS, for example, says, well, you get an authorized telehealth provider, which is going to get very expensive depending on your workforce, or the employer can do it itself, maybe probably through a manager or a supervisor. Okay, well, does that mean it could be done over Zoom? Does it have to be done in person? And these are things that the ETS doesn't answer. But aside from that, it will take up a considerable amount of time if you have a large workforce that needs to be tested. It's really going to take a lot of time to and money.
Wow.
To do. So.
Wow. Wow. Well, this was great, and I think there's a tremendous amount of information in here. So what I'd like to do, Sal, is I'd like to do two things going forward. One is I'd like for you to give everyone your telephone number and an email address where they can reach you. And then two, what I'd like to do is almost make this a little bit of a series. And as we hear the results from the Supreme Court, I think that's going to give us some clarity on which way this thing is going. But now, more importantly, what does an employer need to do based on whatever that ruling may be?
That's right. But Rick, under one condition, as long as you don't take my prediction, you don't hold my prediction, and it's going to be stricken against me if I'm wrong, because who knows?
We're just two guys in casual clothes chatting, so
That's right.
Don't listen to anything that we say and take it with any, there's purely our opinions.
That's right.
So excellent. So if you wouldn't mind giving your contact information, and then we can sign off, and then we can reconvene once the decision comes down.
Sure. So my phone number for New York for New York employers is 212-425-0630. For Connecticut employers, and Massachusetts employers, it's 203-653-5436. And you could reach me at sgangemi@murthalaw.com.
Excellent. So, Sal, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it. And we're going to see you very soon once the Supreme Court of the United States makes their decision.
You got it. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.
Thanks.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.